Hello again. In this second video, I'm going to talk about exam settings that you can use to aid in your exam security. First thing I wanted to mention is you can have multiple exams, and basically what I do is on the final exam I create two exams. I call them exam 1 or exam 2. Here I've called one exam A, one exam 2. Basically what I do is I open one exam during one particular window and tell certain students they have to take that exam during that window, and then I open another exam during another window and tell students they have to take that exam during that window. Now what I have to do in the Grade Center is I have to create a column that will just give their highest grade of the two exams, because obviously they're not going to take one of the exams, so they'll get a 0 on one exam, and then the column will record their only exam grade from the two exams. And of course, if you want to create 3 exams, you could create 3 exams if you wanted to. If you wanted to have a little bit more exam security, you could have create another exam. One thing I do need to let you know is I have to go in after everybody's taken the exam. I have to go in and enter a 0 in the exam that they didn't take. Otherwise, it won't let the exam they did take be the highest grade. In other words, it won't populate the highest grade exam column from the two exams until I enter a 0 for the exam that they didn't take. So, and then what I use is I don't use the columns for these exams in my final exam grade book. What I use is I use that column that identifies their highest grade out of these two exams. And of course, they know they should only take one of these exams. Okay, let me show you the exam settings. I'll just click on this first one here, and I'll click on Edit the Test Options, and we'll just go through line by line. Obviously, you give the exam name. You can put a link, description, content right there. One of the things that kind of helps with security is by putting a statement that basically tells the students, by submitting this exam, you confirm that you satisfied the academic honesty statement on the course syllabus, and let them know that any suspicious activity or grades could result in a failing grade. So something of that nature should be on your test instructions to keep the students honest. You can show instructions to students before they begin the exam, and if that way they see the instructions and they don't want to start the exam at that point, they don't have to. I don't use this setting here. One thing that you have to be careful of is, even though you set the dates, make sure you make the exam link available to the student. So that has to be turned on. I never use the announcements for this, and obviously we don't do multiple exams, so you don't need to do that. And then the forced completion, you can turn that on if you want it to force them to complete it. I don't always turn that on, because if I leave it off and if their exam crashes, their answers will be saved and they can just log back into the exam. But if you want to use the forced completion, just click this button. But just beware, when you click this button, it's going to, if the exam crashes for some reason, you're probably going to have to reset their exam. On the other hand, if you leave it turned off, then it's going to tell the students that they can leave and come back. But I always make it very clear to my students, regardless of what the instructions say, they can't leave and come back, because the clock will still be running, and so their time will run out if they leave and come back. Okay, now set the timer. Here I usually allow 2 hours, and sometimes I'll add 15 or 20 minutes to that just to give them a little bit of a cushion. So here I've allowed 2 hours and 20 minutes. And if you turn this on, it'll shut the exam off as soon as they're done. If you want to allow them to go over the time and then make the decision, then turn that off. And that way it'll allow them to finish the exam even if they go over the time limit. Okay, here, this is just the time that you want the exam visible on the website. And I usually make the exam visible a day or two after the due date, just in case I have any issues that I've got for some reason I have to have students take the exam, so that way I don't have to go in and turn it back on. You can require a password for the exam, and so I usually do that when they're taking the exam in a proctored environment, but I also use it sometimes when I have multiple exams. I can make it password protected, and then a person would have to have the password for that exam. Okay, and then of course your due date, and if you want to allow students to start the test after due date's passed, leave that unchecked. If you don't want to allow students to start the test after the due date's passed, then check it. Again, if you leave it unchecked and a student has a valid reason to take the exam a day late, then if you have that unchecked, it will allow them to take the exam. Otherwise, it will not. Okay, now you're probably going to want to include this in your Grade Center score calculations if this is what you're going to use for the exam. But like I said, if you're going to use a different column, you can uncheck this and not include it in the score calculations if you want to. But if you're just using one exam, then you probably want this checked, and then, implement it into your grading formula. Okay, now I don't show the students anything except for their score after they submit the exam. And actually, on the final exam, I don't show them anything once the exam's over either, because I don't want students to have, for security, I don't want them to have the answers to the final exam, or the key. I don't want them to have the key to the final exam, but I allow them to see their score per question. And then, of course, you can always answer questions individually if students have questions about a particular question on the exam. Now, on the regular exams, I'll turn these on, submitted incorrect answers, so that after the due date for the exam, or you can do after the availability end date, which is probably better, the students can go back in and look at the answers. But like I said, I don't do that on the final exam. Now, some other security settings here is I only do one at a time, and I do one at a time. That way, I don't want students being able to print out the exam, so I just do one at a time. And I also randomize questions, so if one student is taking the same exam as another student, at least the questions will be in a different order. Now, this prohibit backtracking, I wouldn't use that unless students were used to doing something like this, unless you've done it all semester, because students generally want to be able to go back and correct a question if something comes to mind later in the exam. So anyway, that's what I would do there, is I would just leave that unchecked. But if you want to try that, you make sure you let the students know that they cannot go back and change an answer once they've moved on. And then the last thing I want to mention, you can probably search YouTube or Google on how to do this, but if you wanted the students to scan all of their work for an exam and then upload it, you could create a separate column in the Grade Center where students could upload their work, and then that way you would have their work, and you could tell them in the instructions that they have, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours after the exam to upload their work, or I guess you could give them till the next day to upload their work for the exam. You know, whatever you felt comfortable doing, but you could do that. Now, you could probably create a file upload question in this exam where they could save all their work into one PDF file and then upload it in the file upload question. But if you did that, then you'd probably have to go back and grade the exam yourself, or at least submit the grade yourself. I mean, you could create the file upload question to count 0 points if you wanted to, but you'd probably still have to go in and submit the grade. But I honestly couldn't tell you for sure because I've never done that with an exam. So anyway, hopefully with the first video on the different question types you can use, and then on this video with the different exam settings you can use, hopefully that will help you feel more comfortable at creating a more secure exam. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.